بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So the talk tonight is another session of discussion about Nahj al-Balagha, and specifically on the letter of Imam Ali alayhi salam to Malik al-Ashtar, on which we discussed several sessions. So tonight I will go over three other topics that discussed in the letter. They are very important topics related to the way in which the ruler is expected to maintain a relationship to the people, and also to make important decisions. Just to help you refresh your mind, what we discussed last session, we ended with the phrase and the excerpt of the letter in which Imam alayhi salam encouraged and asked Malik to ensure that he distinguishes between the good doers and evil doers in his treatment of them. So he mentioned that ولا يكونن المحسن والمسيء عندك بمنزلة سواء. The righteous and wrongdoer must not be held in equal standing with you. And then Imam explained this. فإن في ذلك تزهيدا لأهل الإحسان في الإحسان. Because for in doing so, if you treat them equally, you discourage the people of virtue from virtuous deeds. وتدريبا لأهل الإساءة على الإساءة. And you train the people of vice in committing misdeeds. You encourage them to commit misdeeds. So this was the last part that we covered in the last session. So Imam highlights that as a ruler, you must reward the good doers and punish the bad doers. So people, they know there is a distinction, the difference between how they are being treated and evaluated by your rule. Then Imam comes to another point, which is about overall treatment of the people by the ruler, and the kind of mentality and perspective that a ruler should have of his people. Imam alayhi salam says, وَاعْلَمْ أنه ليس شيء بأدعى إلى حسن الظن راع برعيته. And know that nothing leads a ruler to hold a good opinion, a positive opinion of his subjects, his people, which means building a stronger bond of trust between the ruler and the people, more than three things. Imam lists three attributes, three characteristics, that these are the most effective in helping you maintaining a positive and good opinion of the people whom you rule. So Imam mentions من إحسانه إليهم, so nothing is more effective than a ruler's kindness towards the people. من إحسانه إليهم وتخفيفه المؤونات عليهم, and his easing of the burdens laid upon them, to ease the difficulties, the struggles that they go through. As a ruler, you help them so they can overcome those barriers, those burdens in their lives. And the third point, Imam alayhi salam says, وَتَرْكِ اسْتِكْرَاحِهِ إِيَّاهُمْ عَلَى مَا لَيْسَ لَهُمْ بِهِ طَاقَةٌ. And he's refraining, for a ruler to refrain from compelling people to do what they cannot bear, what is difficult for them, what they cannot stand it. So Imam alayhi salam says, O Malik, you need to maintain a positive perspective, a positive view of your people. You need to see them in a good light. And for this to happen, you ought to care for them. You ought to be kind towards them. You ought to ease their struggles. You ought to refrain from compelling them to what they can't take it. And then Imam continues, فَلْيَكُنْ مِنْ كَفِي ذَلِكَ. Therefore, let your conduct towards them, فَلْيَكُنْ مِنْ كَفِي ذَلِكَ أَمْرٌ يَجْتَمِعُ لَكَ بِهِ حُسْنُ الظَّنِّ بِرَعِيَّتِكَ. So, let your conduct towards them be such as to strengthen your trust and good opinion of your people. So act in a way that would help you maintain a good opinion of the people. There is one important and very interesting point in these words of Imam alayhi salam. Because Imam alayhi salam here does not say that, O Malik, to make people trust you, you have to do so and so and so. So sometimes we say, for example, a ruler, to achieve the trust of the people, to make people trust him, he has to be kind to them. He has to make easy for them to go through their struggles. He has to avoid pushing them too hard. That's the way a ruler can make people trust him. However, Imam here talks about the ruler trusting people. Imam said these are the ways in which make you trust people. That's very interesting. One can ask oneself how this matters. Being kind towards the others, easing difficulties for the people, and not pushing them helps in me as a ruler maintaining a positive opinion of them. Of course, it makes them trust me. What Imam says here, the Imam's focus here is that, Malik, this is what makes you also having a positive opinion of your people. This is very interesting. What Imam alayhi salam says here, in my understanding, is not just about a moral value for a ruler. Of course, that's a moral value, to care for people, to be kind to them, to ease their struggles, to not push them too much. But also is a strategic kind of advantage in governance. It's a strategic move. So Imam alayhi salam says that first, you ought to cultivate trust. Cultivate your trust to the people, which also leads to people trusting you. This is a very interesting point that my understanding, Imam alayhi salam wants to say that a ruler who maintains positive opinion towards his people, believing in their sincerity, honesty, goodwill, creates a positive feedback loop. That's the very interesting point that Imam alayhi salam seems to highlight here, that a ruler who governs, who who maintains a positive opinion of his people. He governs with confidence rather than fear because he trusts his people. Then he doesn't fear them, rather, he loves them. He rules with confidence. So, what happens is that his people feel respected and trusted, so they reciprocate that trust, they return that trust to the ruler. So, here a loop actually is being created. A loop is starting by a ruler trusting the people and people in return trusting the ruler. And this loop leads to suspicion, coercion being decreased in the community, cooperation and initiatives being increased between the people and the rule. And this is a very interesting point that Imam here mentions. So you see all the similar type of the uh, advice. You may find similar teachings in uh, other forms of the uh, manifestation for government, guidance for the governing people, to try for a ruler to try to uh, make people trust him, to attract the trust of the people. But Imam alayhi salam looks from the other way around. Imam says it's important for you first to trust people. If you trust your people, then your people trust you. And this is a very beautiful loop that Imam uh, illustrates here. And then Imam explains further that when you do that, when you trust your people, there are also other benefits and effects coming with it. فإن حسن الظن يقطع عنك نسبا طويلا. Imam says, indeed, having trust in your people, حسن الظن, and maintaining a positive opinion of them, يقطع عنك نسبا طويلا, will spare you much weariness and trouble, saves you from a lot of trouble in future. What does this mean? What kind of trouble a ruler has to face if he does not trust his people? Very beautiful insight when one reflects on it. The depth of the insight of Amir al-Mu'minin. So one can say that these troubles Imam could refer to the kind of mental, administrative exhaustion that is being caused by mistrust between the rule and the people. When a ruler is suspicious of his people, what happens? The ruler must constantly monitor, investigate, and punish the people because he doesn't trust them. He has to make sure that he has control over them. So he has to use different means for monitoring them, investigating them, punishing them. He has to spend a lot of energy and resources second guessing loyalties of the people around him. He cannot delegate effectively because he suspects betrayal of the people around him. So he cannot focus. He cannot be committed to his responsibilities because he is always worried about losing his power, his authority, people betraying him. Such a ruler lives in fear, surrounded by spies, double checks, intrigues, so on and so forth. Imam says that for you to trust your people saves you all these hassles. A ruler who built mutual trust and goodwill with his people, he doesn't have to suffer from all these difficulties, all these doubts, suspicions, he can govern effectively, peacefully. He needs fewer, of course, still he needs to monitor, to observe the community, but he needs fewer surveillance mechanisms and harsh controls. And he can enjoy a genuine public support that stabilizes his rule. This is a very insightful point that Imam alayhi salam mentions here. So what Imam alayhi salam says here that uh, trust saves enormous political and psychological effects and efforts. It cuts off a long weariness, a long and enormous amount of troubles. يقطع عنك نسبا طويلا. One other thing I found very interesting here, at first I was puzzled actually. It was that the way that Imam here decides on the order of his advice. Usually when we want to encourage people to go through certain means to achieve a goal, we start by explaining why that goal is important. We first explain the necessity of that goal, that purpose. Then we explain to the people the ways in which they can go through it to achieve that goal. But the way that Imam worded his advice here seems different. Imam starts by discussing the ways in which a ruler can help himself trusting his people. And then at the end, Imam talks about the effect of it, the justification for it, the principle behind it, that this saves you a lot of trouble. It could be a trivial matter, but I was puzzled myself that why Imam picked this specific style in this part of the letter. Something that I found and seems to me very interesting is that if Imam alayhi salam was starting by saying that, for example, to save a lot of trouble for yourself, start with trusting the people. So this action could become a kind of selfish principle that a ruler in appearance, he tries to show care for the people, to make himself trust the people, but not for the sake of the people, not as a moral obligation, rather for a benefit to his rule, is to save him a lot of trouble of monitoring people, of fighting people, of, for example, oppressing people. And Imam here, by prioritizing the responsibilities rather than the effect, Imam wants to mention that it's the duty and moral responsibility that matters, not the benefit. Even if the benefit was not there, even if the people were not grateful, still, as a ruler, you ought to trust them. You ought to care for them. You ought to ease difficulties for them. You ought to be careful not to push them too much. So it seems very delicate and very insightful the way that Imam words his advice and the order he picks in reminding Malik of the importance of them. The next part, Imam alayhi salam talks about another important point. So here Imam highlighted for the Malik that it's very important for you as a governor, as a ruler, to ensure that a mutual bond of trust is being established between you and your people. And to do so, you ought to start with yourself. You ought to trust people, and then people trust you. You ought to train your heart to love them. You ought, you ought to train your heart to care for them in easing their difficulties, to care for them in um, not putting on them more than they can bear, they can tolerate. You have to train your heart so your heart becomes compassionate, caring for them. And then in return, what happens? A feedback loop takes place. You trust people, people trust you. And then this leads to saving you a lot of troubles psychologically and also in the term of the governance and the resources that you are using. However, Imam, by prioritizing those responsibilities, wanted to highlight for the Malik that what matters are the moral obligation, is the moral obligation here, not the effect. Although the effect is very important, but you ought to care for the people, no matter if the effect is there or not. The other point that Imam highlights here is about the type of people that a ruler should have positive opinion of them, and the type of people that a ruler has to be careful in trusting them. Although the overall principle is to trust people, still it shouldn't mean for a ruler to trust everyone blindly. He should be careful and wise. Although the overall principle is trusting them, however, there should be a difference between the level of trust that a ruler puts in different type of the people. So Imam alayhi salam says, وَإِنَّ أَحَقَّ مَنْ حَسُنَ ظَنُّكَ بِهِ, the one who deserves your trust the most. لَمَنْ حَسُنَ بَلَاؤُكَ عِنْدَهِ, is the one that your bala of him turned out good. So the one that who deserves your trust the most is the one that your bala of him turned out good. What does it mean, the one your bala of him turned out good? Bala can be translated in two different ways. One way, which I think is most probable possibility here, is to translate it as test, as trial. Bala is a kind of trial by which you measure a person's reliability. So we have in Arabic, بلوت الرجل بلوا وبلاء, means اختبرته, I tried him. So if we understand, we translate bala here as a trial. So the word of the Imam would be that the ones who deserve your trust the most is the one who you tried him before and he turned out to be good. Someone who tried him before, he is trustworthy, so he is the one who deserves to be trusted the most because he passed your test, your trial. You can trust him. So then the other side of the other part of the advice would be وَإِنَّ أَحَقَّ مَنْ صَاءَ ظَنُّكَ بِهِ لَمَنْ صَاءَ بَلَاؤُكَ عِنْدَهِ. In contrast, the person whom you have tested and found untrustworthy is the one who most deserves your mistrust. If you tried someone, he betrayed you, he didn't maintain the trust, he is the one you have to be more careful about him. So in other words, Mom says that build your judgment on facts, on the evidence of your experience of the people, not just based on the words of the others and your assumptions. The ones who you tried them, they passed your test, they showed and they represented themselves as trustworthy people, we can trust them. The ones who failed the test, you have to be more careful about them. But the other way to translate the word bala here, and we have in some uh, examples of the Arabic conversation, Arabic literature, is about treatment and dealing with the people. So your fair dealing with subjects, that's kind of bala, it's called. So, for example, it says, Abla fulanun bala'an hasana, means that he treated that person in a good manner. So if we translate the word bala this way, so that the advice has a different meaning, that the ones whom you can trust the most are the ones whom you treated the most, whom you treated the best. The people whom you treated the best, the people whom you showed care for them, they are most likely the people who would love you back, who would also put their trust in you. And the other way around, the people whom you mistreated them, the people whom you didn't trust them, they are the most likely people who will also, in the same manner, they will betray you. They will not put their trust in you. So it's like the consequence of your own manner. If you trust people, people trust you back. If you mistreat them, you mistrust them, you can only expect the same treatment of them. That's if we understand the word bala as a treatment. And both meaning seems to be correct based on the words of Imam alayhi salam. So the second point, as we see, is Imam alayhi salam highlighting that although he said at the previous point, previous topic we discussed, Imam says, build your heart on compassion and trust in your people. Your main attitude should be trusting people. However, it doesn't mean to be naive. It doesn't mean to trust all people in the same manner. There should be differences. There are people whom you tested before and they proved to be trustworthy. You should have more trust in them. And there are people who failed those tests, which means that you have to be more careful about them. The third point that Imam alayhi salam mentions here, and it's also a very beautiful principle, very insightful advice of Imam alayhi salam, is that Imam alayhi salam tells Malik that it is very important, necessary for you to maintain the positive traditions and sunnah of the past that has been rooted, has been found a stronghold among your people. People, they follow them. And these are positive traditions. It's your responsibility to maintain them and build upon them. Imam alayhi salam says, وَلَا تَنْقُضْ سُنَّةً صَالِحَةً عَمِلَ بِهَا صُدُورُ هَذِهِ الْأُمَّةِ. Do not break a good tradition, a helpful tradition, sunnah, which the leading figures of this community have practiced. And continues the Imam, وَاجْتَمَعَتْ بِهَا الْأُلْفَةِ, those traditions through which harmony was achieved. in the community among the people. وَصَلَحَتْ عَلَيْهَا الرَّعِيَّةِ, and under which the subjects, the people, have prospered. Do not touch them. Do not break them. وَلَا تُحْدِثَنَّ سُنَّةً تَضُرُّ بِشَيْءٍ مِنْ مَاضِي تِلْكَ السُّنَنِ. Do not introduce, do not start, do not establish any new practice, any new sunnah that would harm any of those established positive traditions of the past. Because the Imam says, فَيَكُونَ الْأَجْرُ لِمَنْ سَنَّهَا وَالْوِزْرُ عَلَيْكَ بِمَا نَقَلْتَ مِنْهَا. Otherwise, the reward, the day of judgment, the reward will belong to the ones who established those positive and good traditions. And the burden of sin will be upon you for having violated them. Don't ruin those positive cultural practices, traditions that are prevalent among the people, and people they are used to it. This part of the lecture, in my opinion, highlights a very practical matter that even in contemporary modern rule, this is very important. So when Imam al-Islam talks about avoiding breaking those helpful traditions among the people, what does Imam mean by that? Does Imam mean, for example, those Islamic practices that, oh Malik, do not violate Islamic practices, do not, for example, violate the teachings of Islam, so on and so forth? It's unlikely, because Imam knows that Malik is not such a person. And Malik and people also, they are the early Islamic community, they value and appreciate those Islamic teachings, Islamic practices. And Malik is not someone who you need to remind him not to break, not to violate them. So it seems to me very likely that Imam al-Islam talks not about those religious practices, rather about those cultural practices, those positive cultural practices of the Arab community, those pre-Islamic cultural values that they had, and some were positive in nature. For example, when we are talking about those al-Ashtar al-Haram, the months in which that Arabs, historically, they saw starting any war prohibited in those months. So although many scholars, including like Allama Tabatabai, he mentions that the practice was in origin a practice started by the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. However, gradually it lost its kind of religious color, and at the time of the pre-Islamic Arab culture, pagans were also following the tradition. So it was kind of cultural and Arab tradition at the time. And you see Islam, after the emergence of the Islamic tradition, the Prophet and the Quran emphasizes and kept the practice alive. Or there are other practices like the hospitality of the Arabs, those stories, legends of people like Hasan Doagoo, and how the Arabs were committed to protecting their guests, to provide for them everything, to give them asylum, and protect their guests by their lives. These were cultural values that were dominant in pre-Islamic Arab community. And you see that what Islam did not oppose those practices. Rather, Islam approved them. That the type of the rules that we call them imla'i. They were the ones approved and not the ones ta'sisi. They are not the rules established by Islam. They were the rules that were dominant before emergence of Islam, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the lawgiver, decided to preserve those rules. So it seems that Imam alayhi salam highlights the same point, that there are practices among the people, may not be necessarily Islamic practices, but there are positive practices that have been established by the wise people, those wise leaders of the community in the past. Do not touch them. Do not fight them. Rather, protect them. So maybe we can give examples, like in Iranian tradition, the practices like Nowruz, the practices like celebrating Yalda, the longest night of the year. These are Persian ancient traditions before emergence of Islam. However, the practices are still strongly going on in the community. And one of the reasons is that the practices right now are means for family gatherings, family social interactions, the common in strengthening family bond. Nowruz is the event that by the culturally, historically, Iranians, Persian people, they all around the world, they find relatives, friends, they come together. It's considered an event of uh, uh, gathering, gathering of the people, of the family, or so on and so forth, and strengthening these important bonds within the community. Or similarly, the practice of the night of Yalda. And it's interestingly, you can see that, for example, we have in narrations and the instructions of the our Imams. So, for example, about Nowruz, there are du'as given by the Imams to be recited at the, for example, this practice of the event of Nowruz. And these du'as meant not to oppose and fight the practice, rather to redirect them in a more positive way. So instead of fighting them, what the Imam alayhi salam did, they approved the tradition because of its positive impacts, and they tried to even give it a more positive kind of direction. So the dua that in the, for example, the time of Nowruz is being recited by the Iranians. It's a kind of the tradition of Nowruz. They start the event by this dua: Ya muqallib al-qulub wal-absar, Ya mudabbir al-layl wal-nahar. O the one who you change the hearts, who you change the eyes. So referring to the Allah's helping, guiding the hearts of the people. Allah giving insight to the people. So Imam alayhi salam wanted to say that yes, it is positive. Yes, it's a Nowruz, it's a kind of the event of the change of the seasons. Traditional, historical, the ancient Iranians, they did it as celebration of the change of the seasons every year. But Imam says instead of the change of the season, which is good, which is fine, you have to focus more on changing of your heart and changing of your perspective, your insight. يا مقلب القلوب والأبصار. So you see, this approach is what it was. Seems to me that Imam alayhi salam wants here to highlight the importance of following it. So when Imam alayhi salam says, continues, ولا تحدثن سنة تضر بشيء من ماضي تلك السنن. Do not introduce any new practice that harms those positive established traditions. Because those traditions They have a very positive impact in the community, which Imam alayhi salam highlighted. These traditions are واجتمعت بها الألفة وصلحت عليها الرعية. These are the traditions through which the harmony has been achieved in the community. During Nowruz, during time of, for example, Yalda, people, they come together. They share love, they care for each other. These connections among them being strengthened. وصلحت عليها الرعية, and under which the subjects, the people, have prospered. So then Imam says, refrain from destroying this. And it seems that implies that Imam says that do not implement those policies that could mess with these traditions. For example, if we like to look at the kind of modern lifestyle in the West. So like, say, for example, the example of state policy versus cultural heritage. So consider, for example, a secular government. Many of the Western governments are secular governments dealing with some deep-rooted religious or cultural traditions, like Christmas, like Thanksgiving. These are deep-rooted religious traditions in the West, still very strongly going on. However, the state is secular. Many of the people who celebrate Christmas, they are not Christians and do not believe in those the religious values which are the roots of it. Still, it became a cultural practice more than a religious practice. So if a state wants to, for example, say, I'm a secular state, so I'm going to fight these religious, deep-rooted religious kind of practices. So, for example, I can declare those holidays like Christmas, like Thanksgiving, as working days, which would be a new tradition, and it would even kind of beneficial to uh, economic kind of efficiency of the community, because people would go to work, more production for the community. Imam alayhi salam says, don't do that. This is a wrong policy. A government must avoid this. You see, that's interestingly, that's the way that the secular states they do today. Because Imam says the preservation of the social harmony, this ulfa, takes precedence over new administration kind of efficiencies. Those benefits that you want to bring with a new policy, declaring those days as working days, enhancing the economic, for example, uh, uh, positivity, results of the community. Imam says, no, the social harmony is more important. And Imam says, if you break this chain, if you fight this chain, this positive practice that people are used to it, they are following it, then you are responsible for the outcomes and the consequences, because you are the one who changed the path. So if a government tries to break these traditions, the spiritual merits of this tradition, they remain for the people who founded them. But the government bears the full weight of all resulting social damages. And the same kind of instruction, you see it in the words of the Prophet, peace be upon him. When the Prophet, peace be upon him, says, Man sanna sunnatan hasanatan, whoever introduced a good practice, sunnatan hasanatan, umila biha min ba'dih, that is followed after him, كان له أجره ومثل أجورهم من غير أن ينقص من أجورهم شيئا. He shall have its rewards and the reward of all those who follow that practice without their rewards being diminished in the least. So while everyone who follows the good practice, for example, of connecting with the family members, taking care of them, uh, showing compassion to them. They have their own rewards for that. The person who founded the practice would also takes all those rewards without those rewards being deducted from the people who practice it right now. And then the Prophet continues that it's about the opposite way around, the other way around. وَمَنْ سَنَّ سُنَّةً سَيِّئَةً فَعُمِلَ بِهَا بَعْدَهُ. And whoever introduces an evil practice that is being followed after him, كان عليه وزره ومثل أوزارهم من غير أن ينقص من أوزارهم شيئا. He shall bear its burden, and the burden of all those who followed the wrong practice without their burdens being diminished in the least. So you see the similar concept in the word of the Imam alayhi salam, the Prophet, peace be upon him. So here, especially as I mentioned, the example of the Western communities, you see how this advice of the Imam fits perfectly. So in the modern Western societies, which we are facing a crisis of fragmentation, the problem of the erosion of the family structure. The people are concerned about family ties being severed. So here, the past traditions like Christmas, like Thanksgiving, one can say they are the only remaining glue holding extended families together. These old traditions are the ones that still make people to visit each other at least once a year during the Christmas, to come together to go to the grandfather, to grandmother during the Thanksgiving. These are deeply rooted religious practices, but they benefit the whole community, even the non-religious people. And this what makes Imam's advice a universal advice. It implies that social cohesion is a universal good. واجتمعت بها الألفة. Harmony was achieved. So even if a government does not believe in religious origin, for example, of Christmas or Thanksgiving, still they should respect the sociological function of it, which is the unity, the family, kind of the strengthen the family ties within the community. So in my humble opinion, this is a very beautiful, very powerful insight of Ali alayhi salam here that he mentions about the necessity and the kind of the responsibility of a ruler to maintain these positive traditions. Yes, you can enforce them with values that you like to introduce, but not to oppose them. So looking, and Imam alayhi salam here emphasizes the importance of al-ulfa, the social harmony, and having them within the people, the community. The last point which I wanted to discuss, but I see that time is running, so I just introduced the point, and inshallah, in the next session, I will talk further and explain it. Is the where Imam alayhi salam gives advice to Malik on how to make decisions. Decisions about, for example, these matters we discussed, for example, for Malik to distinguish which traditions are the positive traditions to maintain and which traditions are the harmful traditions to discard them, and how to make decisions in different areas of rule, in economy, in politics, in cultural matters, in religious matters, in military domain, so on and so forth. Imam here has a very insightful advice on whom to engage with, the type of people that a ruler needs to discuss with them, discuss these matters with them, the type of people that a ruler needs to keep them around himself for having a critical approach, having a way of scrutinizing, a way of critically looking at the flaws and the advantages of different policies and how to develop to improve them, how to address those flaws. And this is a very insightful discussion that inshallah I will address it and cover it in the next session. So overall, you see, we spent just 1 hour explaining of only 2-3 sentences of the letter of Imam alayhi salam to Malik. And the reason is that every single expression is so deep that even I don't think that we are giving justice to these expressions, the depth of it, and the knowledge, and the insight, embrace in them. But this is the humble effort that we can do just to better understand, to better benefit from the treasures that Ahlul Bayt, peace be upon them, and specifically Imam Ali alayhi salam, left with us so that we can benefit and find the path through them, inshallah. Please recite a salawat.